My Life Between Lives story from Newton Train Institute practitioners.
I see a whole change in the thrust of searching for answers about who we are and why we're here. And I think it's wonderful, and I just hope the movement continues to expand.
Let us expand the universal consciousness together with a My Life Between Lives story presented by the Michaelnewton Institute.
Welcome to My LBL Story. My name is Ekomananda. I am your host. Today we have special guest, Dr. Diana Paque. Diana is the Executive Director of the Michaelnewton Institute since 2019. She has had a widely varied career ranging from librarianship to government leadership to academic administration. And currently, she is in private practice as a hypnotherapist, Reiki master, and a regressionist. Diana also serves as the editor of MNI's quarterly journal, Stories of the Afterlife. She says, becoming a Newton facilitator found her when she was ready. And for many of us, it takes many more adventures and years to settle into where we belong. And for her, it took much longer. A big warm welcome to Diana. Welcome to the show. I'm really curious, how did you transit from the executive leadership position to the current role as a life between life therapist and are now taking a leadership role in Michaelnewton Institute?
So I had no concept of this work at all when I began looking at what I was going to do after my last job. So I was in the role of academic vice president at a university, a small university, and left that position and was teaching in a graduate school of education. And I kept being introduced to a variety of different hypnotherapy kinds of techniques. And a friend of mine had wanted to do hypnotherapy training, and I didn't have anything to do, so I decided to do it with her. And so we went through the training in 2011, and then I learned about Reiki, and I learned about past life regression, and all of these things that I thought were way beyond me and not my thing at all. And as it turns out, once I started doing regression with people, that it was easy. It was something that was very natural for me. The Michaelnewton Institute fell into my lap. I had a person who was coming to a Reiki meetup of mine, and she came, and after our meetup, she said, "Do you do between life work?" And I said, "Well, when I do a past life, we always go between life at the end." And she goes, no, Michaelnewton between life. And I had no idea who Michaelnewton was. And this is 2016. And I went back and I looked it up, and I saw that one had to be a hypnotherapist and one had to have experienced regression and past lives. And I went onto their website and filled out the application and went and trained. And it was just like that I was introduced to it. I was supposed to be at that meetup, and I was supposed to find out about this work. And in 2018, a call went out for several positions in the leadership of the Newton Institute. And one of them was the executive director. At that point, they were asking for a video that you had to submit with your application. And I go, I'm not doing a video. I'm not going to do that. And so this was in the fall. And then again, it opened again. And I'm thinking to myself, there's a reason why it's open, and there's a reason why you're noticing it. And I think you ought to check it out. And so I did. I contacted Paul, who I had trained with, and said, tell me about this. And he said, oh, you have to talk to Pete. Pete's the one who's handling this. And so I got in touch with Pete and talked to him. And then he introduced me to Judith. And I went through the interview, and that was it. And they chose me over several candidates. And I think the thing for me that is so synchronous that comes together is this is work that makes so much sense to me in doing the work of the soul, in helping people connect to who they really are. And when the opportunity to be executive director came along, it also matched my skills because I have a doctorate in public administration and I have run organizations. And so it was like the things that I'd trained for in my analytical self came together with the things I was engaging in my intuitive self, and they came together as one for the Newton Institute. And I don't think one can plan that. I think that is supposed to happen. And so I've been the executive director since spring of 2019.
Beautiful. How did this work change your outlook of life or change you?
Doing this work has changed me a lot because it introduced me to who I am, not the manifestation that's Diana, but who I am as a soul. The first time I went on a journey and actually experienced what my soul felt like, it was mind-blowing to realize I'm so much more than just me in this lifetime struggling with the things of this lifetime. And that was something that was really new. I'd been working as a therapist and finding that people get stuck in the same ruts because we're dealing with what is in this lifetime, in this manifestation of who we are. And we get stuck in the things that hurt and the things that are too complicated and the things that scare us and worry us. And when one is able to move onto a soul plane, it's like being in your life and seeing a group of trees in front of you. And then you go up on a ridge and you can see that it's actually a forest, or you can see that it's 5 trees. But it gives you a completely different perspective of yourself and who you are and what it is that you are encountering. And to have that shift in perspective can give people hope, that it opens up a whole new understanding of yourself. And I found for me that I have to do the work first so that I really understand what it feels like to have experienced what I'm hoping my clients are going to feel. If you haven't experienced it yourself, how do you know what they're experiencing? And I think that's an important part of this journey, is to do my own work so that I am open and have available to me those resources and understand what it feels like to be in a soul state. Today, I was working with a young woman who is struggling in her life and has all of these problems in her life. And she was in a life that was very focused and she was a judge. So she was trying to take care of people's lives. And when she died and went into spirit, for the first time, she felt that incredible, intense peace and love surrounding her. And it's what she's been seeking in meditation. It's what she's been seeking to know that she is. And she connected with that. I find that such a gift to be able to support people connecting to that, because I know what it feels like to connect to that for the first time. And words can't describe it. I mean, you know this, the words can't describe it. So
Yes. I mean, to me, it's a gift, absolute honor to be able to do this work and guiding people who come to us. And you mentioned that we need to do this work first. And what sort of work that we need to do to the self that allow us to become a better guide or therapist? Would you like to talk a little bit about your, inner work?
I think I started doing inner work a long time ago and went through a variety of different kinds of therapies. And in around 2010 or 11, I began to see, I'd been married since 1990, and I was feeling that this marriage was falling apart, and I didn't have the courage to leave it. And so I began to do this training and found that I had everything I needed to move off in a direction that supported me and go through a really difficult transition. And for me, it was making the choice that I mattered. And I didn't matter in relation to anyone else. I mattered in relation to me and who I am. It wasn't about me in partnership with somebody. It was about me taking care of me and trusting me. And that began to open up my greater understanding of how, when we work with ourselves, how we begin to develop skills in the intuitive self. When we study and go to school, we train our analytical selves. We train that part of our minds. That's what we learn how to do. Where do we ever learn to train ourselves intuitively? Where do we ever learn to trust that part of us? And I think it's in doing our own work that we are able to open those parts of us that we first want to explore, but then begin to trust what we get from it. When I started doing hypnotherapy, what I learned was that I don't see when I'm in deep trance. I feel. I'm very kinesthetic, so I'm very feeling, I'm very sensing. I don't see. And so when I was learning different kinds of hypnotherapy, it was very, very frustrating to me to have people using visual language, like, you can see this, or this is here and you can see it. It's like, no, I can't. And I went through so many trainings where people just use visual language. And I was so frustrated, and I would sit there through the training and the teacher would ask, well, how was that? And my hand would shoot up and say, it was useless because you used only visual language and I'm not visual in trance. And that taught me about different ways of knowing and how I had to learn how I knew and to support others as they began to explore beyond human knowing. How do you know? What is your intuition? How do you receive it? Is it verbal? Is it sensory? Is it felt? Is it seen? And the more I explored that, the more I was drawing to me people who could not see or were having difficulty, and began to work with people and help them understand their ways of knowing, which then helped me understand my ways of knowing. So I think as I began to do this work with the Newton Institute and being a facilitator, the more I understood about how we as humans receive input and receive guidance, and how we're unique individuals and we have our unique blend of receptors, and that not all of us are the same. In many ways, it isn't, we receive differently at different times, and being open to that and helping people understand that what they experience is what they experience, and to help them release the bonds of human judgment. Humans tend to be very judgmental. We judge everything. It isn't that we just observe it, we judge it. Oh, I didn't see anything, I must be doing it wrong. I mean, that's the common response I got. Well, I didn't want to say anything because I thought I should be able to do it, and I felt uncomfortable and I felt ashamed I couldn't. And it's like, people are conditioned to judge and to judge themselves more harshly. Again, that's opening up knowing, a way to work with people. And what I see in this work that we do is that as we work with people, we begin to unfold our own understanding and our own ways of knowing, in addition to that of clients. So it's an ever-expanding opportunity to support connection, our own and that of others. I don't think there's an end to it. I think it's always an open process. There will always be more to know.
It's a very beautiful way to explain the process or the journey that we're on today. During the sessions, particularly life between life therapy, how did you importance of such work in transforming humanity or lifting the consciousness awareness as we step up in light, becoming knowing the self?
So over the past year, I've been developing a way of talking about the dimensions of the soul in relation to the dimensions of the person, because people really do not get how huge the soul is in relation to this incarnation. And obviously, this is a very simple way of explaining it. But if the soul is the size of your human self, let's say it's the size of my human self in relation to the soul is the size of my little toe. And the little toe, if I am living at my little toe self, my little toe is always down in the mud, is always seeing the lowest vibrational energy, and is always in connection with the lowest vibration. While the soul is up in the sky and able to feel the sun, the toe isn't. And what happens if I'm in my little toe self, and I stub my toe? It really hurts. It can overwhelm me. But how does it impact the soul? Is the soul overwhelmed when the toe gets stubbed? Probably not, because it is an element of the soul as opposed to the entirety. And so when one can be connected to one's soul self, which is an element of God, it is the God energy, it is source, then we have all of the resources of those connections. And it helps us, even if we don't believe about the connections, it helps us put into perspective what happens in our daily lives. So understanding that we are not a human with a soul, we are a soul with a human incarnation. By putting it into that perspective, it can shift how you view something that happens to you. So when I begin to work with clients who are dealing with life issues and difficulties, and we start talking about who they really are, they can get that sense of there's this human incarnation that's very small and the soul is very large. And when I take them on a journey so they can experience the soul, they really understand how small they are in this incarnation in relation to the largeness of the soul. And it helps them refocus, and it helps them rethink what is going on in their lives. Recently, I had a young woman who is working in a job that she hates. She doesn't get along with the people. And she had a situation where someone who was her boss was moving her into another unit that she didn't like, and she didn't belong there. And she was going to have to train someone who was going to be her supervisor to do the same work. And in the past, that would have made her really angry and really upset and really fight back. And the week before, she had gone on this journey into her true self. And she was able to take a deep breath, feel who she really was, look at herself in this situation and say, you know, it just confirms that I was planning on leaving this job. And this confirms that that decision is correct. What a different response to getting angry and blowing up and creating a bigger nightmare for herself. And so just having an understanding of the perspective of looking at this from a different perspective opened up for her the opportunity to engage with something in her human life in a completely different way. It opened up that ability to sense differently, to use her intuitive self, not just the part of her that was reactive and angry and frustrated, that was in her human self, down in the lower levels of vibration, but she could move into that higher level of vibration where her soul is and look at it all from that higher level and not be upset and not do something destructive to herself. And she came out of that going, wow, this is really amazing. It's a completely different experience than I've experienced in the past. So for me, to help someone handle a life situation, something that is a day-to-day kind of thing, which is why people usually come to therapy, to help them do that is really mind-blowing, because now they've got a new resource. They are the soul. They're not just this little toe down in the low vibrations.
How beautiful that the work that we're doing, this life between life therapy, lifted the understanding and accept what is happening in our lives, and be able to just maintain the equilibrium, the balance, and the joy that we are naturally supposed to be, but we forgot about that. What do you say your interpretation is why humans suffer?
I think humans suffer because they are experiencing their surroundings from a space of low vibration, that we live in that low vibration. It's, as I said, it's the life of the little toe. We experience that. So we experience the anger and frustration and ignorance and lack of knowing and judgment and manipulation that are part of being human. And I think that's what makes Earth School so difficult, is the makeup of the human being, that the way that we protect ourselves is to create barriers around us to try and keep ourselves safe. And how do we do that? We do that not only by observing, but by judging and then acting on what we judge. And there are those who act from their soul level from time to time and act in a space of higher vibration. But there are those who are very disconnected from their souls, who do not ever connect with that higher vibration and act to take care of themselves because they're greedy and they take care of their own needs to the exclusion of others. And you see this in the world all the time, of people who don't care that the people around them are suffering and who do not interact with people in a way that supports others. And in the United States, there is such a break between people who are choosing to help others and see everybody as a soul, see everybody as who they are, and those who want to create division and move us down into negative spaces. And the Earth School has those negative spaces. And when we come here, how do we learn? We learn from those who were here before us, what we've experienced, what our parents have experienced, what our grandparents have experienced. And we have a planet that has earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes and all sorts of things where people can get their equilibrium upset. And how do they deal with it? Some people go and help their neighbors. Other people gather everything together for themselves and are greedy and don't help others. And I think we learn through the tragedies that happen in life that we don't understand and we can't control. And I think that is part of the nature of being on this planet. We're not here to have the peace that we have when we're in our soul home. We're here to stretch and learn. And ultimately, our goal is to live to the fullest of who we are and to experience the joy that is home and the love that we know is there on a planet where this is not the primary condition. That's a very difficult journey. You know, if you grow up in a place where there's poverty and there's only poverty, chances are you are not necessarily disturbed by other people in other parts of the world having a lot of money. So let's say you live in Bangladesh and you live with your family and you have love in your family and you don't have a lot of resources. Are you particularly upset that somebody in Washington, D.C. has a mansion? Probably not, because it doesn't affect your daily life. But if you have a flood come through and destroy what you have and destroy your family, and people hurt you instead of help you to recover, then how do you respond to that? And I think we learn through those experiences, and those experiences get carried through us, get carried through as trauma, and then we experience trauma, both of our own and that of our past. So I think Earth is a very difficult place. I mean, Michael talked about Earth School being a very difficult place that we come to experience and to really grow, to experience ourselves in very difficult situations and circumstances. And in my experience, when I've worked with individuals who have been on other planets and other dimensions, most of those dimensions are much more supportive, are much more loving, are much more connected to each other. And they come to Earth and are quite upset at times on being on Earth instead of being in the environment that they came from before. But it's about growth. It's not about being home and being at peace and feeling that love. How do you get that kind of love, that kind of peace, that kind of knowing when you're in an environment of turmoil and trauma? I mean, those are the people we face. Those are the people who come, if they are awakening, they come to try and get home and understand what that is and know that there is more than the trauma that they're facing.
I love your concept of this entire body and to explain the body self, the body mind conditioned self versus the soul self, and the Earth School concept or the framework that we are aware of who we truly are. Now, in terms of coming here to learn, I wonder, is there an end to this learning? Where do we go after if we learn a lesson? Do we continue to come back? And what's the next journey?
Some people continue to come back. Some souls come back because they like to incarnate. They enjoy incarnating. They come back in service. So they may have learned their lessons. They may be guides. Their service may be to support younger souls on their journeys. I find that as I work with older souls, they make choices about what next. Do they incarnate again or not? Do they have work on the soul plane that they are doing that takes precedence? Maybe for a while. Maybe they want to come back. And so they choose that. Souls, from my experience, work on lessons over a long period of time. And so it's almost like coming to a life and you have a whole truckload of lessons you could work on. I tend to bring a whole truck and just pour them all into a life and say, okay, this is what I'm working on this lifetime. And then as I move down a path, as I make choices, then some of those lessons are going to come up and some of them aren't. They just aren't going to show up because I chose to go right and some of them are to the left. And that's okay because they're more lifetimes. Some lessons we can complete in a lifetime and some we can't. Many we can't. If you think about lessons like patience, self-love, self-trust, these are huge lessons that relate to how we love ourselves. And so these are lessons that extend over multiple lifetimes. I find that when I'm working with very old souls and ones who are coming to the point of choosing to incarnate again or not, the lessons they're working on are all about self-love. And that makes total sense to me because since the universe, since Source is love, if we are unable to perfectly love ourselves, how can we connect with this universe that is love unless we are love? Unless we love who we are and what we are. And so these lessons of self-love may take on many different forms. Over many lifetimes, we learn to trust and love and appreciate the dimensions of our soul that are love and to live as love. I also find that as we set up lives, one of the things that we do is that we work with other souls. Sometimes when we're working with other souls, we may set up, oh, let's work on this. Let's work on this lesson. We're going to take on this challenge. And so you and another soul come together and you say, we're going to do X. Well, in a lifetime, you may complete X, but they don't. And it may take a second lifetime. So you come back together in the next lifetime so you can work on X for them. And so we have lifetimes where we are working on lessons and contracts with other souls that may go beyond a single lifetime. And we see when we look at lives that sit next to each other, like if we look at the most immediate past life, you can see that some of the same souls are there with the client in that life as in this life, and may even be in the same position. So you may have the same mother, you may have the same brother, you may have someone who shows up as your best friend who in your past life was your sister. And it's because the lessons are continuing. So souls may have completed their portion of the work, and yet the other person may not have. And so if we are in agreement to help another soul do their work, we may need to continue to incarnate in order to support that other person. I once had a man who in this lifetime was a minister, and he came to me, I guess he was in his 60s, and he came and he was saying, I have all of these women in my life, and as far as I'm concerned, I've worked through all of the issues that I've had with them over time, but they're not going away. They're still in my life. And when he asked his counsel about it, they said, they're still in your life because they still have work to do. Yes, you completed your work, but they didn't. You're here for them now. That's why it feels like everything is done on your end, but it's not done on theirs. And so you are here to support their work. So many times we're here to support the work of others, not that we may remember that, but that we're here for their benefit, for the benefit of somebody else, which may cause us to choose to incarnate again. So as souls age, if you could call it aging, they make choices about where they go next, about their service. Is there service on earth? I've had several clients who are learning to be spirit guides and who are working with young souls and learning to work with young souls. I had one particular woman who said, when I look around for friends, there's nobody like me. I'm not finding people like me. And when she went home, her guides explained to her that she will be working around souls who are not like her, who are baby souls, who are very young souls, that she is going to be guiding, and she needs to learn how to engage with them and not tell them what to do, but to support them in their own journeys. And so in this lifetime, she has people around her in this incarnation to help her understand how to work with people that she is not meant to be friends with. She is meant to be there as a supportive guide, but not as a parent, not as someone who tells them what to do, but to be a loving guide. And it made a huge difference to her to understand that. Why is there nobody around who is my friend? And it's because she was running into souls that she was learning how to become a guide. To me, that's just fascinating. So people do soul work on Earth, and they may come back to Earth to experience the work they will ultimately be doing as a soul.
Well, lessons. And what the mind knows is not entirely the truth, so-called the truth. Now, if the soul did not learn, did not complete that lesson, do they have to come back?
They can choose to come back. It's always a choice. And sometimes the soul gets very tired of lessons. It's like, I don't want to deal with this lesson again. I've dealt with it for the last 10 lifetimes. I'm tired of it. And so they move on to something else, because there is always more to learn, always more to know. And if I don't complete it now, well, I may have more insight that will help me engage with this again in a different way in the future. Is there a requirement to come back and work on something that was really difficult? Not necessarily. However, one's personal growth and one's sense of self and access to greater understanding is the result of doing one's own work. And so how fast you do it, whether you do something for 10 lifetimes and then say, I'm just not going to incarnate for a while, I need a break, and sit it out for 1,000 years. Is there a requirement to come back? We always have free will. We are individuated aspects of the God energy. We have an individual self that, while the wholeness of who we are is of the God energy, it is the God energy, we still are individuated into the souls that we are. And as individuated aspects of God, we have free will. And we can choose. And we can choose how fast we do something. We can choose how long we take. The man who had multiple women in his life, when he got to his council, he said, I noticed that most of my soul group are gone. And his council said, that's because they've finished their work. They're off in different groups. We're really glad to see you here. You're finally working on some of these things that you've put off. And they were just giving him a bad time. They weren't criticizing him. They were just laughing with him. For he was choosing to work more slowly. He had that capacity. If his soul group all finished their work and went off into other things that were interesting to them, they chose to do that. And he chose to have a good time and to enjoy lives of leisure and to stay put on a soul level and not incarnate. And he had every capacity to choose that because the soul has free will.
I like the concept that if we don't finish everything in this life, we can take a break, or we don't have to come back. This is not necessarily the same teaching from other systems, for example, Buddhism or Christ consciousness or the Hindu culture. Now we are exposed to this new learning. How do you see the Michaelnewton Institute, the role it plays in shifting our understanding and knowing the self?
I think coming from where Michael was a pioneer and a researcher who was looking to know more. And he came from the premise that he was a psychotherapist and found that when his clients went out of a past life and went between life, they found aspects of themselves as they connected to consciousness that helped them in this lifetime. He wasn't coming from a religious background. He didn't have a religious tradition that he was connected to, such as Catholicism or Hinduism or religion. So he wasn't coming at this from a religious perspective. He probably wasn't coming at it from a spiritual perspective. His intention was to help the individual live better, be more comfortable, have greater connection to who they are, so their lives were better. I mean, fundamentally better. And the way that it turned out was that souls found their way into a space where they were no longer in bodies. They were simply in a soul state and connected to consciousness. And that began that exploration. So it wasn't what he was looking for. It's what turned out from his clients doing their work and going into a space of the soul. So I think it's a different perspective. It's a different kind of inquiry. When we look at a tradition, let's say, I'll just pick Hinduism, not because I know a lot about Hinduism, but let me just start there. Because there's a strong tradition of believing in past lives and that you move from one lifetime to another lifetime to another lifetime. In Catholicism, we believe that when one finishes a life and you haven't lived that life perfectly, then you have to go to a place where your soul can repent and perfect itself. And that place is called purgatory. So in the Catholic tradition, you go to purgatory. Well, where is purgatory? Purgatory is a place of learning where you are stressed by having lessons to learn. And what is living life on earth but lessons to learn? So there is such a crossover between the concept of past lives and purgatory that never in my time engaging in Catholic theology did I ever come across anyone ever talking about the correlation of past lives and purgatory. Never. Because they're different religious traditions. And Michael is looking at it not from that, but from the value to the individual of living a life that gives them the greatest opportunity to be themselves. If we look at life from the principle that I am in this body, in this lifetime, and my prime purpose in being here is to fully experience Diana. That's why I'm here. Yeah, that's it. It's very simple. It's very complicated, but it's very simple. I'm here. I chose to be in this form to experience everything that crosses Diana's path. And there's no religious symbolism there. There's nothing that connects me to any particular tradition. And I think coming from Michael's perspective, he's all about the best possible life for the individual. Why are they in therapy? To improve their lives. And that was his starting point, was therapy. And the more that he learned, the more he learned about the journey of the soul and began to see how these soul journeys were changing people's lives, that they understood more about themselves, who they were, what resources they have, where their connections are. And as he looked more, he began to look at elements of the quantum field and how in the quantum field, everything is present now. There is no past, there is no future, everything is now. And that the God energy is always present now. And so we are always in the now. And he and Pete, I don't know when they started talking about this, but Pete was president of the Newton Institute, and he and Michael had many long talks about quantum physics and about between lives and what that looks like and what people experience. And out of that, Pete developed his initial models of quantum consciousness, which is taking one into a soul space. So there is an experience that we have as souls that we can explore that Michael found, and that has opened up much new learning for many people. It's not religious. It doesn't have a religious foundation. And people who come from religious foundations are always looking for the connections. I don't think that the connections were ever naturally built. We may draw something from it. I'm drawing from my experience, but I'm not necessarily looking at the work that I'm doing as something that has a religious foundation, because the clients I work with may not. And it's not my tradition. I'm bringing them to the place of their soul, not mine. I may have the tradition of purgatory, but they might not, and that might not make sense to them, even though it makes sense to me. So in Michael's work, he was working with a large number of people who came from very different backgrounds. And what we're finding as we're expanding this work into other cultures is that there are different cultural understandings of what this work is, of what the soul is, and that how you understand this work and how I understand this work may have overlap, but may be significantly different, and neither is right or wrong. It just is. And we work with this according to our connections, and the people who come to see us relate to the connections that we have and the journey that we can offer them. And it varies across the world. And that makes sense because we are a dynamic planet with many different traditions and many different religions. When I work with people in India, I have several clients in India, and when I was starting to work with them, I realized that these particular clients did not know much about past life experiences, even though they were Hindu. They knew it from books, they knew it from their traditions, but it wasn't something of experience. And so to go on a past life journey into a past life was something that none of them had ever experienced. They were curious, but they hadn't experienced it. And I found that in working with them, I had to change the way I took them into a trance state, into an altered state, because of their cultural differences to me. And so I had to work with them to find what supported them in relaxing and going to that space of connection. And it was different than the way I go. So I think we have to be flexible in the way that Michael was flexible, and not presume there's one way, or there's a religious way, or there is a right way or a wrong way. There simply is the way that you are connecting in this moment with this particular client.
What a beautiful way to interpret the core of our work. And I always tell my clients or anyone comes into my life, I said, just relax your ideas, relax your perceptions, because the very core of ideas cause us suffering. Our expectations, interpretations, they may not be the true pictures. And I particularly admire Michael's how he started work. It's neither religious nor spiritual. And I found that itself is profound. It's simply what we do, helping people, in your words, to live the best life possible. And that is all. It's in the now. Enjoy every single moment.
They just don't live that way. And it's teaching them there is more to the moment than they are experiencing. So how they experience the moment, if they can experience it from an expanded state of self with a capital S, it's completely different than that little toe experience of the small s, where they're caught up in traffic and bills to pay and what to cook for dinner, and kids making messes in the house, and all of these things that are very the irritants of life. It's to be in that expanded state, whoa, this is amazing. And the woman I was working with today, she said she has anxiety, and in this expanded state, she said, there's no anxiety. I'm totally calm. I'm at peace. I said, this is your true self. You are always at peace when you move into this state of you. You do not have to be in anxiety. Choose to move into an expanded state, and you do the work so it becomes easier and easier for you to get there on your own. So I see our role is to help people make those connections. It's not our role to help people necessarily sustain the connections over their lifetimes, but we're helping them get started. We're not doing their work for them. We're supporting them and showing them how to open the doors of their own life. And when they open them, they can be really overwhelmed. And that's always wonderful. It's always so joyous to experience someone who is sitting in absolute peace and bliss, who is someone who on a daily basis is sitting in anxiety. And here for several hours, she's in bliss. I mean, what a joy.
What a joy. That's our nature state. We're always joyful. We're always at peace, at ease. And this reminds me about your recent work, What Every Soul Knows. Would you like to share a little bit more to the audience about that?
There is a film that's going to be coming out in December, and it's called What Every Soul Knows. And Paul Orand is in this film, as well as me. And the filmmaker was asking a variety of people from different fields to comment on what the soul is, what we know, what our journeys are about, how shifting into a connection of soul consciousness changed our lives. And so the film, I think from what he said, he has so much material. He's going to have part 1 and part 2 of the film. in the film, I think we each get something like a minute or two of time in the film itself. But because each of us came and gave our time, he created from the material, he created for each of us between half an hour and an hour of content that is posted on the What Every Soul Knows website. And so the content for mine is part of the original interview that he then collected and put into an abbreviated, it's about an hour, that he did for me as a thank you for participating in the film. And this man is someone who has done filmmaking. He's done a lot of different kinds of things and is passionate about understanding the afterlife and about helping others understand the afterlife. And so he's created this film that is coming out in December. There is another series called Journeys of the Soul. The first, What Every Soul Knows, his name is Peter Alessandria, is the filmmaker. And there is another series that has appeared on Gaia, on the Gaia network, called Journeys of the Soul. And the filmmaker for this series, his name is David Marsh. And David is a really fascinating guy who wants to spread the word about soul journeys and how they change your life. Several years ago, this is like 2020, he contacted me and we had a long conversation. It was during COVID. And he said, I want to film people doing this work. And so he came to my house. He lives in Arizona and I live in California. And he drove to my house and stayed here for a couple of days and made a film of our work together and did an interview for me. Coming off of that, he realized that trying to do a single film was too difficult. And there were too many different variations of connecting to consciousness. And so he began talking in 2022 about doing something more expanded. And he called me and asked me how I felt about this. And I got him in touch with Sanela Kovic, who was involved in social media for the Newton Institute. And we had a conversation with him about, wouldn't it be wonderful to have sessions filmed so that people could see the experience of what it might be like if you did it yourself? I think there are 30-something sessions that he filmed of QHHT sessions and quantum sessions and LBL sessions that he filmed all over the world, and that he went to see people in Europe, and he went to Dubai, and he went all over the United States and filmed individual sessions and then abbreviated them to get the content without, giving too much of the client's so the client could remain, fairly anonymous. And it was a wonderful series. And it's been sold to Gaia. So it's another one to look at. And I think that there is the energy out there now to bring this work to people through media that's available and accessible. So whether it's on YouTube or on a network like Gaia or a movie that is shown in a movie theater or sold to a network, I think there is much more interest, people wanting to know, what's it like? What is this work we do? If you look on Facebook, there is a Michaelnewton Facebook page, fan page, and people are always asking about, what does it feel like to do this? It's really expensive. I don't know if I want to spend the money on it. And the general feeling is it's worth doing. You will learn something about you. This is, if you really want to know about you and all of you, connect to consciousness. And how do you do that? You may be able to do it on your own. You may be able to do it through something like Reiki. You may have a different energy experience. Or you may choose LBL or another therapy, another tradition to support you in connecting to consciousness. And I think for me, having worked for several years with this, is that the approach that Michaelnewton took, especially in writing his early books, was to tell the stories of ordinary people who are experiencing their journeys and what that feels like to them. What does that feel like? What do you learn? And he wrote it to the person who might be interested in doing the journey, not to psychotherapists. He wanted people to experience this themselves, to experience their connections to consciousness. And because of that, he started training people so it wasn't just him doing this work. That's why we're here, is because he started a way to train people and expand the work. And so the movies, the videos, all of this is bringing this content, this knowing, to more people, to the world. And so I'm very grateful to Peter and to David for their work that brings forward our work. There is such a convergence of interest and energy now, even as the earth has experienced so much darkness and so much turmoil and so much sadness and war and pain. There is still this movement and this energy towards building light and towards supporting people finding their own light and being in their best selves, in that highest plane of themselves. And that's what Michael was working towards. That's why we're doing this work, or at least that's why I'm doing this work.
How did this separation come to be?
My sense is that we came to Earth and that the environment that we're in is conditioning our sense of separation. And that the form that we're in, our human form, is very isolating. That we are in bodies that seem to be separate from each other. That the way we perceive ourselves and perceive others is separate. And that this planet reinforces separation. And when souls experience themselves in other dimensions, what we find, what I've found with souls, is they can experience planets and environments that do not have the separation. So, for example, one can be, there was someone who described it like mushrooms, where there is something that's above the ground, but under the ground you have all of these myceli, the connections, that all the mushrooms under the ground are connected because they're all connected. So they have their unique identity that is above the ground, but they're all connected in this interwoven natural connection that supports communication, supports knowing what's happening in the planet. They're actually literally connected to the planet. That's a completely different description than how humans are and how this earth runs. I've been on planets where the energy is an energy of healing. I've worked with healers who have been on planets where all communication is telepathic. And I remember the first one I went with to one of these planets is someone who's a yoga instructor, and she teaches Reiki, and she's very into connections to the physical body and the soul. And we were trying to describe the energy, and I said, is it like Reiki energy? And she goes, there is no Reiki healing here. We don't need this. There's a natural inclination of healing among all parts, because health is a natural state that all of us sustain. It's a value. And so we are always connected in a loving way to keep ourselves, the individuals in this community, healthy. And it doesn't require a thought. It simply is a state of being. Humans are, and this planet, do not have those dimensions. We are very separate, and that isolation causes distortion. If you look at what happens when a prisoner is put into solitary confinement, that they only have themselves to deal with, and they begin to turn into themselves, and they start engaging with themselves. And if they're there long enough, they can become really warped and really, really badly mentally disabled. And it's because of the isolation. So even as that's an extreme, we as individuals in these human bodies see ourselves as distinct individuals, separate from every other individual, and that our forms of connection are only partial connection, that we have physical contact, perhaps, but it's always us and someone else. It's not that we merge. And so we're in this human environment, we are never in a place of complete embracing of connection and joy and love. There's always separation. And so I think that is one of the greatest challenges of being on Earth, is that isolation, that separation, that is a natural aspect of this planet. And it's why we struggle. If all, I think about this from time to time, and I think about if all that we are to do and meant to do is to be able to be joyful and be loving and connect as love with the whole of all that is, if we are separated from that and moved into an environment that is separate, how do we create that joy? How can we be love and be joy? So there's always the challenge to be that. And how do we do that? And in an environment where that is not the dominant force, and there are all sorts of other forces going on, it's very easy to get caught up in the darkness, because the darkness then begins to create itself. And we come up against that all the time on this planet. And so for people to begin to awaken to being more than the darkness and search for more, so that they can live better, even in this lifetime, and live better and find there is more, and that we are more, and that we can be light. What a miracle. What an eye-opener. And I feel blessed that I was given that opportunity. And I feel blessed that I'm given the opportunity to help others. And that's what this work is about. As Michael learned, it's to help people in their lives on this planet that's hard. So here we are, years later, carrying this on this planet as it is now, with the souls that are here now, and the souls that are reaching out. There are a lot of souls now who carry an interest, who carry an understanding of their soul selves, who are light, and that we find them. If we are light, we find those who are light. And that's joyful too. So there's opportunities if you can move into your own light.
Thank you so much for your wonderful wisdom and sharing. I hope that helps our audience to understand the core of Michaelnewton's teaching and the life between lives therapy. And as our second World Conference is fast approaching, and do you have anything to share with us about the conference?
I'm very excited about our conference. We had a conference in 2017, and we had planned a conference in 2020, and then COVID happened and we couldn't hold one. This conference is about bringing us together as community to remember who we are individually and as the community, and to use this as a foundation to build to the future. And over the last year or so, we've been exploring ways that move beyond the foundation of Michael's teaching and bring this work present and can bring it forward. And so this conference is to help us with that. We are going to have programs that help bring new learning, new ways of teaching to people who trained a long time ago. So the conference has a program to have our current teachers talking about what students are learning now, about the core concepts that are the foundation of the work that we do. We are also engaging in looking at we have a program on the connection between art and what we do. How do we bring art into this work? How do we connect people to their true selves? What do we use? How do we support them? There are going to be several opportunities to share LBLs. And our research director, Ilsa, is going to have questions that we are going to explore in our LBL share that we can then use for our research projects. So I'm excited about having another opportunity for our members to share LBLs. A lot of people don't get that opportunity to share with each other. And then part of it is just to have fun and to explore, where do we go from here? Who are we as an organization? How do we grow? How do we rebuild the in-person connections that really help solidify the foundation of this work? It used to be we trained in person, and now we are moving back in that direction with a hybrid program. But for a while, we were only training online, and I think people really miss the human connection. So this is about bringing the human connection. The other thing that I'm very excited about, and that we will be announcing at the conference, is the release of our new book. So the Michaelnewton Institute is publishing a book this year called Finding Purpose. And this book is due to be released around November 1st and will be available on Amazon approximately November 1st. And it is based on stories that have come from our journal, Stories of the Afterlife. And so it contains a number of stories that have been updated since they were published in the journal. And so we are publishing this book this year, and we have a whole new publishing arm of ourselves looking to the future of publishing more books and moving into other media. So this is really opening the door to approaching the public directly through books, through various media productions, through the work that you're doing. How do we reach people? And it's through sharing what we do and what we know. The conference is a really good opportunity for us to meet, to renew friendships, to make new ones, and to build for what's coming up as we expand into who we are becoming in the future and how we can support the people of this planet.
How exciting! Conference, a new book, and further collaboration to support each other, rising in light and love.
It should be a really wonderful conference. We also will be doing an online version of this for our members who are unable to come, that we'll be advertising soon. And then after the conference, we will be selling an edited version to the public, so they will be able to see some of the work that we have done and understand how we learn and how we teach ourselves. I'm very excited about where we're going and all of the new wonderful energy that is a part of who we are now. And I thank you for being part of this too, because you've brought some energy that was not here before.
Well, we're here to help each other. I'm not doing that much. I'm just responding to whatever the calling is. So, yeah, here the body is having fun. Whatever we do, we make sure that we have joy and experience peace and this wonderful vibration as we come to be one. And you have shared a lot of jewels and diamonds, this wisdom, so beautiful. I wonder if you may have one final piece of advice to our audience.
Don't give up on yourself. My sense is that we come to find ourselves when we're ready. When we are open, things appear. The universe brings to us what we are ready for. And so there is always more opportunity. And there is always the opportunity to grow and know more about ourselves and know more about others. And if one is of the light and knows that you're a light being, then you're here with us on purpose. And we're all here now because we are meant to be. It's not random that we found each other. So I encourage individuals, people, our members, and anyone who is listening to this to have hope, to reach out, to connect. Because in connection, you will find more of yourself. You will find your light.
That's wonderful. Don't give up. And come
Exactly. You might be 80 years old and just starting to do this work. Or you may be 20 and say, oh, I'm so late doing this. I go, no, I'm working with a guy who's 84 and he's just starting. So there is always time. You're here to be the fullest expression of you. And it's really helpful to know who you are, to be your fullest self.
Thank you so much, Diane, for
Thank you.
sharing your divine wisdom. I'm full of joy just listening to your talking.
Thank you all, and I appreciate the opportunity to share about our institute, about our founder, Michaelnewton, and about this wonderful work that we've been called to do. And I encourage anyone who is interested to reach out and to check out the Newton Institute's website, newtoninstitute.org, and see what we're offering. And if you're interested, find a facilitator. It's easy. We're all over the world. Learn more. Contact us. We're always happy to share more information.
What is the best way to contact you?
My website is sfbayregressions.com, or if you go to the Newton website, I am listed as one of the facilitators, and that may be the easiest way if they don't remember my direct website. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to spend some time with you.
It is my absolute pleasure to learn more about you as the executive director.
You're bringing a different energy than was here before, and that is so good. We so needed you. I love the way that you're approaching this. It's this work. It needed you, and here you are. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I don't see my own difference and how I'm different to others. I don't know. I'm just being me. So, yeah.
I know. I hear that. I'm just being me. And yet you bring you. You're of a different generation than I am. So how you see the world is different than the way I see the world, simply because of age. And you are from a different part of the world than I am. So we interpret things differently through our own cultural filters. And how you approach technology and how you approach media is very different because it's something that is really known to you. And I'm of a generation that has had to learn this rather than growing up with it. So we need all of us.
True. Everybody brings different color into the story that make it so wonderful and the playful and the colorful.
Thank you. I really appreciate you wanting to interview me.
We're helping each other to do the beautiful work. And that perhaps comes to the end of our conversation. Thank you again for coming to the show. We appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you.